All right, I am now joined by another Benjamin Blanchard, who wrote a article in Current Affairs about ants, which I have to say, when he first messaged me and said he'd written that it was going to be something about ants and socialism. My first reaction wasn't enthusiastic, but I was like, all right, they published this in Current Affairs, let's check it out. And then having read it, I was excited about having him on. I thought it'd be a fun conversation. So how are you doing, Ben?
Good. I'm glad that I feel like it's something that like seems kind of random, but then like it actually ends up being maybe a little more interesting than than someone might think. Plus, I just love ants, so I feel like it is a good excuse to say a lot about ants too. So I was glad that Current Affairs agreed to publish it, and they actually reached out to me to publish this article. I'm not joking. They like asked me if I wanted to. I just had a little interaction with them about something on the podcast where they referenced ants. And then and they asked me if I wanted to write an article about if ants were fascist or a socialist. So
yeah, right. Which is, of course, what you I think part of my trepidation was I think like, I think about associating ants with socialism, and I think like, oh God, this sounds like the most kind of like awful vision of what somebody could possibly mean by socialism.
How dare you?
So I think that, actually, it's funny. You referenced two things in the article, which I read or watched respectively early in life, and, probably left a mark, like a lasting impression about how I think about this. One of which is this old, like, black and white science fiction horror cheesy movie, Them, about giant ants. And the other one, the more relevant one, is T.H. White, the Once and Future King. There's a part of that where I probably read this when I was like 12 or something, but they did stick in my head. Recognized immediately when you said this in the article, about where there's a point where in that book where Merlin is turning the young King Arthur into various kinds of animals so he can have stints. Like learning whatever you can learn from, being one of those kinds of animals.
Right.
Actually, as I say this, I have no idea when this book was published. I don't know if you know.
Yeah, actually, I'm forgetting as well. Actually, because I think I don't like cite the year, and I'm forgetting. Yeah, when it was, if I even ever knew. But
yeah, so. Okay, so apparently it collects and revises shorter novels published from 1938 to 1940. So it comes, which is interesting because actually, as I was thinking about this, the part of that book where Merlin turns Arthur, into an ant, like the depiction of ant society is pretty much exactly like in 1984, the depiction of the proles in 1984. The only difference seems to be that there's like the prole, there's the proles equivalent and there's the Big Brother equivalent. But there's no inner party of people who have to be like convinced of the complicated ideology. It's extraordinarily authoritarian. You quote the tagline. Everything that's not forbidden is compulsory.
Right. I feel like a lot of people view ants like kind of like on the surface, right? Before going deeper into the colony. But
yeah, and it's ruled over by the authoritarian queen, and they also, like, the ants are a member in the T.H. White were like, they were also like this like weird caricature of like, of like uneducated working class British people, like there was a lot of stuff about them like listening to music that they called like I don't even remember what it was, but it was like the tunes or something. Like the ants got really excited about whatever the ant equivalent was of top 40 radio.
Yeah. And I think it was also kind of viewed as some sort of like brainwashing, like probably partially brainwashing thing, like probably through their antennae, although it doesn't say it directly, I don't think, in the story. But
yeah, right. Okay. Yeah, you mentioned, I'd forgotten this, but you mentioned this in the article that like Aunt Arthur has been somehow mentally directed by the central, whatever's going on there.
Yeah, they like he like hears like commands and stuff, and like and what I remember one thing which also is similar to maybe some of like I think like 1984, maybe both 94 and like Brave New World's kind of concepts of like controlling language. Like they have the concept of like that pretty much everything is put into like done or not done, and again and like that's kind of like the exclusive, like a lot of parts of human language, or what we would think of as language, is like reduced in ant world to just done or not done, which was of course also viewed as very authoritarian and stuff.
Yeah, right. So it's just like newspeak. So of course this is the kind of thing I was thinking of. That it's like, oh God, so there's like a sense, that ants are like very collectivist, but this is like the worst image of socialism you want to put forward as a socialist, because if you want to say
it's like a Fox News version or something.
yeah, exactly. But
which we shouldn't trust, because a fox is a vertebrate and this is about insects, so we shouldn't trust their interpretation anyway. So
there we go. And in but like reading the article, like you make some interesting points about this, right? That it's not that like this is this socialist society in some like sort of like hideous caricature of Stalinism sort of way, but actually that like so here's maybe a good way to frame it. Let me just do a quick screen share. I'm 100% sure you've seen this before, but let me do screen share. Okay, Chrome tab. Here we go. So this is a classic tweet from a couple years ago by Dr. Jordan Peterson. So he says 30% 30% of the ants do 70% of the work, not a consequence of the West or capitalism, in case it needs to be said. So maybe this would be a good jumping off point. In what respect is this tweet misleading?
Yeah. Well, so what actually I think is funny is is that actually like in some ways I think this tweet could be read as like, yeah, this is a great endorsement of like socialism or more communal things. I think everyone would kind of like to either distribute work more, or like why is it that like work is this like this like glorious thing or something. Maybe if you think about even a human society is like for example, in many societies, like elderly folks won't do as much work or won't do any work, or people aren't able to work for various reasons, and that we actually, at least I view that as like a good thing, that we had this like some like distribution of labor for like people who can work, they can work, and people who can't, they don't.
Yeah. So like what you'd think when you were just reading this, especially knowing Peterson's like big themes, or that would be that like 30% of the ants are like meritocratic go-getters, and then like they're presumably reaping the rewards of this, whereas like the other 70% are lazy and they're
right and I think
poverty or something. But yeah, go for it.
Yeah, and like I think what's interesting also is that this is like citing a story that I actually then kind of use in my a published paper. I believe this is citing I think it's David Charbonneau and colleagues' work, which is framed as like they found that there were like lazy ants, and actually like the workers. And this is actually true for a lot of different ant societies, different species. There's about over 13,000 species that we know of ants right now. And they found that actually there's a lot of works that a lot of the workers don't actually work for like long periods of time. But like I actually view that as kind of this like great example. Well, look, you can have a fully functioning and very successul society. Ants have been around for over 120 million years, and there's only one human species. Ants have over 13,000, and from an evolutionary perspective, they're way more successful in some ways.
So it's and there are lots of ants that at any given time are not working. Like maybe they'd be like called in if there was something for them to do. Essentially,
right. And that's actually one of the elements that could be this is also misleading. Is that there's actually there's a cycling. Like at least part of the findings is that there could be a rotation of work if they're needed, or just kind of like a natural rotation. Obviously, sometimes workers that are foraging will die, which is very sad. Sometimes they die by scientists collecting them, but and so I would say that like even the idea, really this would be again true for I think a lot of human societies, that like it depends on the kind of time slice you're looking at. And then even if there is the case that there are some workers that do like no work over the generation, you can ask yourself, and I would think that Peterson would like this kind of thing, but I don't know, like you ask yourself, like, why does it exist in nature? Why has it even evolved and seems to be successful? to have this set up where some aren't working for, even if it is for long periods of time.
So like it's not that like 30% of the ants have learned to to sit up straight and clean their rooms and and the other 70% have. It's that, of course, okay, some maybe can't work, but that's okay, they're still fed, and then some and then the rest of them they're working in cycles. So at any given time 30% are working. So essentially that sounds like ants have a lot more free time than us, which sounds nice. Also, what I got out of your article is that the way we talk about it, right? Like that. Actually, so first, while we're still talking about Peterson Peterson, I think it would be I think it'd be funny to mention the gender aspect of all of this.
Yeah, so I think one really key element for ants, and this is actually true for all ant, in nature there's a lot of like exceptions. As far as I know, there's actually no exceptions to this rule among all known species of ants that all the workers are actually female. In fact, not just all the workers, pretty much all the ants in the ant society at any given time in a colony are female. And the males basically like are produced one time of year. I actually write my article, they live for about a day, mate, and then die. But strictly speaking, sometimes they'll be like bumming around the colony for like a month or so. But on like an ant time scale, like some leafcutter ants can live up to like 30 years in the lab, for example, the colony. But the males are produced just one time of like 1 year, and then they go out, and then the rest of the life of that colony is just all female all the time. And so like as I write my article, there's like, if ants could theoretically conceive of like a gender concepts or like any kind of gender concept, like males wouldn't really like feature in the concept at all. And so it's actually it's a very different sort of like framework than people, and then certainly Jordan Peterson's famous / infamous way of framing things.
Right. I mean, you could just as easily say that 100% of ants who work and make decisions are female, not a consequence of postmodern Marxism, in case it needs to be said.
Right, exactly.
And so, look, obviously, it's a little silly to say, that anything ants are doing is not going to be a one-to-one analogy with any possible way of organizing a human society. But that said, since ants don't have like reasoning and free will and all that good stuff, but
that we know of.
But if we are going to make that comparison, it is kind of funny how far what we actually know about their form of social organization is from what's implied by the terminology that we apply to them, right? So like this, and in fact, like to the point where the terminology probably says a lot more about us than it says about them, right? That like we sort of see these creatures who are operating in a way that has absolutely no resemblance to this, and we think, okay, so what's clearly going on here is an absolute monarchy
with a queen. Yeah, and really it is it puts the ant in anthropomorphizing, but so the queen is actually like similar to how workers is a bit of a misnomer. We're finding out with more research, at least like some of the workers don't actually work. The queen is actually really like a pretty thorough misnomer, especially in ant societies. And this differs from other social groups like termites, which I don't cite in the article, but in ants, the queen does pretty much no like top-down control. Occasionally it will do, the queen will exert some kind of control on reproduction. So she might like release some chemicals that prevent some other workers from being able to lay eggs. But that's only true in some species, because many species of ants, the kind of most like derived ones, the ones that have sort of like evolved, the most kind of discrete castes, they can no longer lay eggs anyway. So the queen doesn't actually do any kind of control. She is pretty much just the reproductive unit of the colony, and then the workers are the ones that go and make all the decisions, and it's a collective decision process. It's very top down. It's almost like an ideal collective decision making process. It's pretty much actually like the opposite, almost as opposite as you can get from a top down control. The workers just go out and forage, and if they find food, and over time, like a trail will get strengthened depending on different processes. It's all very like lateral, right? Yeah. So, which I think is pretty interesting.
Yeah. So to the extent that, you know, you can talk about like, you know, ants engaging in some sort of chemical pseudo communication and decisions emerging from that as like equivalent to a form of human, you know, social organization, which obviously it's a very, very different kind of thing. But if we were going to play that game,
right? A union committee meeting than might want to be, but
yeah. But if I mean, but if we do play that game, then it's actually a lot less like, you know, this like weird, you know, like the sort of monarchy that the terminology applies, or like
right.
or like some weird like fascist 1984 thing where, you know, like it's a lot less like that than I mean, look, I mean, there's the workers in this case have a process by which decisions collectively emerge, right? So if we are going to play the game of saying that it's like a form of human social organization, it's actually a lot more like workers' control of the means of production than it is like a you know, like this.
And that seems like it's like a not too bad life. Like you get to like, you know, like everyone like kind of cleans each other. Like you get to live, you get to actually not work all the time. You know, it's and as you know, like there's actually one thing that an editor or current affairs editor like noted, which I was aware of some, but was that even human, like previous human work frameworks were much less like regimented. And even I know some research that suggests that in many societies, like especially historically, that there would actually be less hours that we'd be working, and that like in 8 hours we would be considered a lot actually to work, and you'd have like a month or 2 months or 3 months off actually, sometimes because of the seasons, you know. And it's like, and so I think even like things that seem kind of foreign a bit about ant society organization actually are not like as foreign even to human societies as we might think, like even in a kind of direct comparison way, in some ways.
Yeah, right. Because like if you think about feudal societies, and you know, previous, you know, modes of production maybe too, but certainly feudalism. So in some ways, you know, on one dimension, it's like much more oppressive than capitalism, because you know, if you're a serf, you're literally bound to the land. You're not allowed to like leave and, you know, go work for yourself somewhere else. Or, you know, decide that you get better conditions in a different manner. But there is definitely this dimension in which, you know, certainly if you, certainly by comparison to like early capitalist societies, or, you know, any place where you've got like this sort of primitive accumulation going on, that it's less oppressive in the sense that you get way more free time, right? Like in the you know, in the Catholic Middle Ages, like, you know, every other day is some sort of holiday.
Right. Yeah. And I think there's ways to kind of combine the two, because that's kind of one of the things. Yeah, and I totally cite in the article that absolutely there are things about ants. You know, like there, you know, ants. You know, speaking of kind of early capitalism, some ants, like weaver ants, they bind the leaves together to make their colonies, and they actually use their larva that produces silk, and they carry their larvae around like a little glue gun, and it produces silk that then they glue the leaves together with. And like that's kind of basic form of like child labor, which I would obviously not endorse in humans. And so like, you know, like it's one of the many examples of, there obviously are things in ants that are, you know, would be abhorrent if applied to humans, but there's also like things in humans that are abhorrent when applied to humans. So like, you know, I think it doesn't like preclude being able to kind of learn some, you know.
Yeah, well, so that's a good time, because before I turn it over to questions, I see a couple in the chat. You know, I want to get your thoughts on before you take off and Doug comes on. I did want to talk about the analogies, because this is also a fun thing in the article that you mention, you know, a couple of examples of people in various, you know, human, you know, protest movements who have who've taken like very like, you know, anti-authoritarian things from ant analogies, like for example, somebody who was a Tiananmen Square survivor you quoted in the article.
Right. Yeah. Like, and I could even like quote like directly, or one of the. I mean, well, actually, that's right. Like that one's kind of a long. Yeah, I have the article with me, but but it's like it's I can kind of like summarize. It's the wisdom of the ants story, which is pretty cool. And I actually learned about this when I was doing research in southern China on ants, of course. and a fellow researcher mentioned this story, and she mentioned it's basically like a fable where the ants are on this mountaintop, and there's a fire below them that's kind of going up the mountain. And in order to survive, they realize that they all have to bunch together as a ball and roll down the mountainside. And then they survive. The colony survives, but of course the ones on the outside, some of them get burned. But it was a communal decision. That's sort of this idea of like collective sacrifice, or collective decision, and there's some sacrifice for like the survival of the colony. And I think that too has clear relations to I think some of the kind of most like noble even anti-authoritarian actions, from the Tiananmen Square protest to obviously the Black Lives Matter protest to like resistance to the Nazis, like all kinds of examples where people are obviously putting their lives on the line, but we actually view that as like a good thing. It's not like some kind of, we don't think of it as like a creepy form of self-sacrifice or something. It's actually for like the common good, and people know that they're going to potentially.
Yeah, right. Some of the ants rolling down to quench the fire are going to die in the process, just like somebody is these protest movements against authoritarian governments. People are going to die in the process. So it's
and as I said in the article, like there's actually like calls for self-sacrifice, by on the right, by conservatives in the U.S., like with things like the economy, for the sake of the economy, to actually with COVID, like to actually be at higher risk for you or your family members dying in order to keep the economy running. And I cite that, definitely I think there is somebody's leftist, I think will ignore it, but like there is sometimes, there is like an argument to be made that, the economy is related to human flourishing in certain ways as well. And so it's not like it's completely crazy or something. And it's directly related to people's livelihood, but also like, I think when there's something more directly, when like the sacrifice is more for some direct good, like, preserving, like I think I'm like, spiritual flourishing or family cohesion, all those sorts of things that we might think are good. I think it's usually healthier to have a more kind of direct connection rather than like for the economy, which then leads to creepy. Right. I think creepy things on the right, forms of self-sacrifice. So it's like,
well, especially because there are some things that are truly essential, but there is a whole lot of the economy that actually could be put on hold, and you could just pay people to stay at home. Not unlike those 70% of ants. But I did want to do a couple questions before you go. So one of them was, okay, I'm actually not entirely sure I understand the question, but I expect you will. So Luke says, does Benjamin have thoughts on E.O. Wilson? Isn't he usually taken to be on the side of the neoliberal entomologists?
Yeah, so this is like obviously it's a live public chat, but and actually E.O. Wilson is technically my academic grandfather, because my advisor Corey Moreau is my PhD advisor, which I completed this year, and she was actually his like last student at Harvard. But so I do genuinely first of all, his work is just amazing. He's super influential in myrmecology, the study of ants. But yeah, definitely some of his like views, his more kind of like broader views, I have I don't agree with, and actually I cite that in my article. I cite how both him and Bert Holdobler say that socialism is actually right. It just they just found the like Marx just had the wrong species. And I said that I disagree with that. I agree with them saying that the collective decision making is what made them so successful on the earth, but then disagree that why does it have to be the wrong species? And so I kind of disagree in general with some of his, like he has kind of the views about how to be successful in academia, which I think might be true for some people, in that it would involve like there's lots of like sacrifice of your time, or like he says things like true scientists don't take vacations, and things like this that I have very strong kind of ideological oppositions to. Even though I think it truly probably did work for him, but I think it's at least not the life I would want to have. And if that's what it takes to become an E.O. Wilson, then like I technically wouldn't want to become an E.O. Wilson, and I'm fine with that. So that would kind of be my summary. But yeah, he kind of made ants cool again in terms of like scientific research. Like there's lots of ant researchers that I think are around because of his work and the work of his colleagues. So it's mixed. My view would be mixed.
All right, fair enough. So lightning round. 255 AD says asks if you've read Children of Time.
Oh, I think I heard about that. I have a friend who I think referenced that to me, but I have not actually read it yet. Yeah.
Okay, fair enough.
I think I'm gonna have like extended ant usage. Right? Yeah.
Darius Hennon asks, who are some of the legends in evolutionary biology you admire?
Who are some of the legends of evolution about? Interesting. I gotta be honest, I tend to like sort of resist having like big like idols, or like, I don't know, maybe it's part of my like anti-hierarchy thing, because even though like Wilson would be like an obvious one, and I feel like I sort of you know, feel like I don't have like specific people that I like. I mean, in general, although I will say I've actually read a kind of shockingly little of his work, but like Stephen Jay Gould always seems like he was kind of an interesting.
I was just thinking about Gould. Yes,
I think one thing I really respect with him, and I admire actually, is not as much about his obviously amazing paleontological work, but also like just the way he had this clear eye that like a scientist is also a political person, or a person embedded in a society, and was clearly committed to engaging in society. I think like those are the people who I like kind of feel most like kind of inspired by, and I would like to emulate, although it's very difficult to do. So
yeah, fair enough. Right. Yeah, I mean, I think Gould's a really good choice. I mean, is like both somebody who actually did have great scientific contributions, and is also like a very good writer and had good politics. So can't do much better than
that. Wilson is also actually involved in society in terms of specific on like climate change and conservation. So like, yeah, I mean, like just so I wasn't like just dissing Wilson.
All right, fair enough. Anything you want to plug before you go?
Well, I mean, I guess I have a website, thedailyant.com, although I will say for the past month and a half, I've not posted. I've been a little bit on a hiatus. I kind of been a little hit or miss with it. But yeah, I mean, you can feel free to subscribe there if you want. And yes, I put Mirmicology Dies in Darkness as a homage to the Washington Post. Yeah, and it's just kind of a website of all things ants. We actually have a Philosophy Fridays series on there, which is I also now updated. It was going strong for 2 years or so. And it was actual philosophers writing about some philosophy concept using ants. So I don't know if you, Benny, I can pitch it to you if you would actually want to contribute a piece to that series. But
sure. I could. Let me think about that. Yeah, that'd be fun.
Sure, no, I suddenly put you on the spot here in the live chat.
No, I mean, I don't know that I could think of anything right off the top of my head, but if I can, I'll do it. So
yeah, about 50% of the people that responded that I asked philosophers responded that
way. Yeah. All right, sounds good. Thank you so much, Ben, and thank you for the article. That was fun.
Yeah, and thanks for the opportunity to come on too. It was really fun.
All right, awesome. Thanks. All right, I am now joined by my friend and comrade and editor Doug Lain. So he is he's the editor of Zero Books and also of some science fiction novels. And the
writer of those, not the editor.
Yeah. Sorry, good point. Yeah. Yes, I said that wrong. He's the editor of Zero Books and the writer of some science fiction novels, published by other people. And he is joining me today to, I hope that YouTube doesn't consider disparaging the boot to be a bootable offense, but we will see, because he's joining me today to talk about YouTube censorship.
Yeah, we at Zero Books just had a kind of frightening brush with the censors at YouTube. We received not a strike, but a warning from YouTube that we were on our way to a strike. Because of a video that I put up on Tuesday that was actually mostly about Christopher Lasch. I've been looking at his book, Agony of the Left. But because of I'm making these for YouTube, I always try to find some clickable subject to layer on top of the real subject, right? And this time it was, I thought, well, I'll talk about these conspiracy theories around the World Economic Forum's idea of the Great Reset, and see how that connects to Christopher Lasch's critique of the left and the way the left has turned from a movement for socialism or populist movements towards a statist kind of progressivist movement. And there's the late 19th, early 20th century history of that, and then there's how that developed and can be seen today, and that's what the video was about. But at the start, I did some things that must have triggered the algorithm, because I put a clip of Alex Jones ranting about how COVID-19 is a hoax. And I followed it up with saying something like, well, it's easy to dismiss Alex Jones, but we should, if we're going to be true critical theorists, we should look for the rational kernel in his rantings. And then I said something like, this is where you might want to beat me because you don't want your own channel to get hit. But I said, of course, COVID-19 is a weapon against the working class, as everything in capitalist society is used as a weapon against the working class. And I went on from there. And maybe the algorithm or whatever entity was responsible for evaluating this video heard that much and decided that I was saying that the globalists had created a bioweapon to destroy the Western civilization or something. But there are layers to this problem.
Yeah.
The first layer is that there's a new rule that you are not allowed to dispute the World Health Organization's recommendations on COVID-19, especially when it comes to social distancing and social isolation. I think that's what
So I do want to just interject really quick. First, Roy, thank you for the super chat. Says answer the master race, which makes me think of Kent Brockman when he thinks that he gets the image from the space shuttle that Homer's on that makes him think that giant ants are about to take over the world, and he immediately becomes a quisling for them in like 10 seconds. More relevantly to this part of the discussion, 255 AD says, can you censor people if you're not a state actor? Which I think is a big question at the heart of this. I mean, my monosyllabic answer would basically be yes. But we'll certainly get into that as we go. I did just want to say, like, one particularly funny thing about this, apart from the larger issue, is the live stream's up automatically. You can just, in fact, I think right now, you can immediately, if you're a big ant fan and you miss the ants, you can go back to it later. But yeah, like, is that. Like, one of the funny things about saying that you can't dispute the World Health Organization, advice about COVID, which immediately hits me, is that if that rule had been applied in March, then you wouldn't have been allowed to post YouTube videos advocating the use of masks because of the World Health Organization was recommended against them. Yeah,
I'm creating a video, of course, to respond to this moment, and that is my very first point, which is that the World Health Organization and CDC recommendations change, that they are self-disputing because they are supposedly based on science. I mean, in the case of masks, that was obviously just a case of bad acting.
Yeah, I mean, if you read the details of what they were saying, like their stated reason for not recommending them, like they never really made sense on their own terms. Like one of them was about one of their stated reasons was that it would give people a false sense of security, which is like, hell, if that's a good enough reason to recommend against taking a safety measure, then we shouldn't be wearing seatbelts either, because then you'll drive recklessly, because you think you're invulnerable. But that's the point, right? Like like we do presumably in that situation, we would want to be able to to dispute their recommendations, because we'd want to encourage people to wear masks. And then, of course, the other funny thing about this is that, whatever you think about the free speech issue, if this was a video of somebody who was saying COVID is a big globalist conspiracy, there really is no COVID, or whatever, like whatever you think about that. And, I would still take the position here that we should be disturbed by the corporate censorship. But this is the opposite, which is not an uncommon consequence of censorship of all kinds, right? Like the example that I always remember is, I don't remember, it was either Catherine McKinnon or Andrew Dworkin, but one of those two had her books. I think there was a point when you couldn't send one of their books through the mail in Canada because of laws that she had actually pushed for, against sending, to make it harder to send pornography through the mail. And of course, if you are going to include, if you're going to have a book that denounces pornography at length, then you're going to end up having to describe some of it, and then it's going to end up coming under the heading of the ban. And it seems like something similar is happening here. And I think it's particularly like in that case, I think this was like the 80s or 90s. This was just some like, weird Canadian bureaucrat deciding this, but that's the kind of thing that you're going to be even more prone to with something on the scale of YouTube, where most of the censorship isn't even going to be done by human beings.
Right. I mean, so there are multiple layers of the problem. The first problem, I think the first order problem, is that it's a bad policy to say you're not allowed to critique the World Health Organization or try to dispute their recommendations in public. However, if the YouTube was a publisher, they could take that editorial line. That's not, right. And it would be censorship, but it would be censorship in the name of curating the content and creating an identity for the publisher. That would be also a kind of speech, right?
Yeah, I think that's right. So, I mean, when we talk about censorship, so what? Like, I think there's a narrow.
I mean, just to be clear and to be out and up front on this, I have canceled a book. Myself. Recently, for saying things that I thought were too close to disputing the common wisdom on social distancing and lockdowns. That we took a book thinking it would be one kind of book. When we got it, it was closer to a right-wing critique of the response to COVID. We contacted the author who had published with us before and said, "I'm sorry, but we're going to have to cancel this book." And she was not happy. I'm sure, but it was our editorial line, and I think it was a kind of censorship, but it was also within our rights to do that. In this case, it's more complicated than it would be for us. But anyway, I'll let you.
No, that seems right. Like, so I think, it's funny actually, as you were saying that, all I could think is like, oh yeah, book about COVID. God, I wouldn't want to write one of those. That I spend so much of my life right now trying not to think about COVID all the time. That sounds.
Those will be real popular in 2022. Real long shelf life on those.
But right, like, so I think when we say censorship, like, there are at least two things we could mean, probably more than that, right? But like, one of them is like, there's a narrow sense of censorship, which is what people I think often have in mind when they say that private organizations can't censor, which is basically censorship means like the state says that you can't print something. And of course that is like, a particularly heinous form of censorship, but also
it's one that we're protected against. That's the difference, right? I mean, there's censorship that you're protected against, that we all recognize as a threat to democracy or freedom. And then there's a kind of everyday censorship which we are more tolerant of.
Well, and so I think when it comes to that everyday censorship, I think that, like, I think there might be a really broad conception, which is just like decide, anybody who's is in a position to decide whether something is aired or not, deciding that it's not aired, right? If you want to call that censorship, right? That's an incredibly broad sense, but that's also not necessarily bad, right? That it's, I don't think that, I mean, look, I certainly don't think that Jacobin is under any sort of moral obligation or should be under any sort of legal obligation to publish Trump supporters. And I don't think that the National Review is under any sort of moral obligation or should be under any sort of legal obligation to publish me. I think that's totally fine. I think that you doing, like deciding, what books are going to be published by Zero Books, based on partly political considerations, is totally fine. I think that given my, my proclivities towards Menshevik deviationism, I'm probably at the outer edge of what can be published at Zero Books, but that's but in
unfortunately, no. I need to tighten up the line.
Okay, there are worse than me who get published. But in any case, but I think that there is a in between. Thank you so much, Sanki Rapachi, for the super sticker. I think there's an in between thing, which is that oftentimes when we say censorship, and particularly when there's like an implied negative judgment when we say censorship. I think that's best understood as saying that what we mean is something that illegitimately blocks the free flow of information, the free exchange of ideas. And of course, all of the action is going to be, and all of the dispute about that is going to be at the illegitimately, right? What's illegitimate?
Right. Yeah. Right.
And you can just be a libertarian and say that, basically anything a private organization decides to do is legitimate. That's always struck me as a really weird line for leftists to take. That especially because when it comes to YouTube, so there are two issues, right? One is the sort of legal argument you just mentioned, which is that they're kind of trying to have it both ways, right? That like on the one hand,
yeah, we should spell that out because it's not. I don't think we've said it all the way yet.
Yeah. Okay, yeah. Spell that out, and then we'll go on.
Yeah. Do you want me to spell it out? Okay, so there's something called Article 230 that was part of a digital act, and basically a way to regulate the tech sector and the new emerging internet sector that happened in the 90s. I'm not sure exactly when this Article 230 was put into place, but what it said was that it was actually designed to give internet companies more of an ability to moderate their content without becoming publishers, so that they could be held accountable for illegal content or content that was beyond community standards, right? So they were given protection from litigation because they wanted to be able to be not just not hire editors to look over every piece of information that got published on their site, but just be a free for all on the one hand, but on the other hand, have the right to go in and moderate the content that they were allowing to be posted. So there's this fine line between moderating content and limiting speech. And sometimes it's thought of as being about whether or not they're a publisher or a platform. It's not necessarily always thought of that way. And I've looked into this a little bit. There are other arguments, but the main argument is that as you make more and more demands upon these tech companies to moderate content along lines that are maybe political, and after 2016, there was a lot of pressure on them to do that, the more it seems that they are acting as publishers, and the less justified their protection from litigation is. So that's the legal side of the problem. This is something that's really facing the companies more than it is helping the creators. It's like, will these tech companies, as they impose these standards, be able to hold on to the protection from litigation that sort of allows them to have this business model in the first place? So one way to think about, like, the way you kind of gestured at this, right? But like, that you can think, okay, so you have platforms, which means that they're like relatively neutral, that anybody, almost anybody can come on and say almost anything. Then which almost is crucial, because there are there are things that are built into this model that you are allowed to exercise some control over. That it's not, even if you do see YouTube strictly as a platform and they're really adhering to that, that doesn't mean that that you can, that you can post a video, calling for the assassination of specific people by name, or, right.
That like you can,
or pornography for that matter.
Yeah. Or pornography for that matter. Right. Mm-hmm. So, but like there are like certain things that you can't do, but more or less, this is not, it's not a publisher that, that like, if you had published that book at zero, then that would have indicated that like Zero Books was, at least okay with the point of view in the book.
Even in publishing, we would try to indemnify ourselves against litigation in certain instances, and push that all onto the author as much as possible. But, but yeah, we would ultimately be thought of as speaking this ourselves, and could be held responsible in courts for defamation. And like Soft Skull Press had to get rid of all their books on Bush Jr. or George W. Bush. Because of not because of things they said about him, but because of things that the book said about this petty criminal, or someone who had been called a petty criminal in the book. And that was all because they hadn't vetted the material well enough, and it turned out there was defamation of character in the book, and they had to take it down. There was
and so if you're a publisher, then the idea, at least crudely, is that there's some sense in which you're saying the things that you publish. Whereas if you're a platform, then you're just providing a platform, and other people are coming on and saying whatever they're saying. That like I don't know, like if you have like Hyde Park, if that's that's the property of the City of London, I guess, but London. The local government in London is not saying whatever people at the Speaker Square are saying. And YouTube, crucially, right? The reason that YouTube can't be taken to task, that has all this legal protection, that YouTube itself can't be sanctioned for various things that people say in its videos, is because it insists that it is a platform, not a publisher. So, like the same way that the phone company isn't responsible for what people say on the phone, that YouTube isn't responsible for what people say in YouTube videos. But then, and this kind of answers a question I saw flying by in the chat a while ago. Oh, so, Zero Books is taking its line, YouTube's taking its line. Well, the point is that by their own sort of legal self-categorization, they're not supposed to take a line. They're not supposed to be a publisher that decides what merits, air into the world and what doesn't in any sort of substantive content-based way, even if they have some rules about, certain forms of hate speech or slander or other things, but just provides a platform for whoever to say it. So that's the sort of narrow legal argument. They're trying to have it both ways, and be a platform when it's convenient to them, and be a publisher when it's convenient.
Another way to think of it is if you thought about them as a self-publisher. Or like Amazon has a service where you can go and publish whatever book you want of your own, right? And if they had a line that said, no, we will not publish books that are critical of the World Health Organization, then it might be thought of, or it's like you couldn't find a printer who would do so. That would be a severe limit on free speech. And I think that when a company like Google dominates so much of what has become the public sphere online, it does become a question of political speech rights in the country when these companies take certain kinds of positions.
Yeah, so that's what I want to kind of get to, right? So even beyond, like, I think obviously that's sort of the sort of narrow legal argument we talked about is a real problem for their position. But also, even if they found some way to to justify that, or the laws were changed or whatever, I think there's the deeper issue about corporate censorship, which is that I think a key difference between YouTube and a lot of other things is just that so damn much of the flow of information in our society right now is controlled by this one company that they get to. That sure, you can say it's a private organization, but like I think it's actually telling when you start thinking about the kind of metaphors that people sometimes use when they're describing it, right? That like nobody has a right to come over to my house and say whatever in my living room or whatever. It's like, yeah, and there aren't hundreds of millions of people in your living room, and people don't rely on what's said in your living room as one of their main ways of accessing, substantive political debates and, et cetera.
Right.
So I think that you can, I think that you can say that when you say censorship can be understood as a illegitimate block to the flow of information, that we think, normatively, not legally, that this is illegitimate. because we value having these be relatively open spaces, and also because on a more pragmatic level, having this tiny number of corporate oligarchs, or really having essentially, the equivalent here of a bunch of robots programmed by a tiny number of corporate oligarchs, decide what you can and can't say, is something that seems like it can't possibly end well for the left.
Yeah, I mean, this is the other side of it. This is maybe the even deeper side of it, which is that putting aside some of the ideological or legal issues around speech, we live in a society. We live in a society now that's a, I can't even say that without thinking of the Joker. But we are facing the reality of our communication systems being structured so that a few programs, not even people, but a few programs or bits of software are regulating ineptly our speech. So we, as a YouTuber, someone who works in this space, you know all about the algorithm, or at least you try to, and there are a whole bunch of consequences that come from the way the algorithm works, and you're trying to always tailor your content and figure out how to get the algorithm to promote your content so that you can be financially successful on the platform. But one of the other things that you have to do now is think about what words you can say that will get past the algorithm and what you can't say, and what topics are on going to trigger the robots' wrath and what topics are going to get past them. It's interesting that on the one hand, my video, which is about critiquing progressivism and advocating for a revolutionary socialism, wasn't censored for advocating for revolution, right? But for saying something that it didn't say, right? I was not saying that people shouldn't social distance or wear a mask or that COVID was a hoax, even though I said it was a weapon. If you're a human being would know that I didn't say that. And on the other hand, a YouTube show like Trigonometry can spend 2.5 hours giving a doctor a platform to go through step by step why masks kill people more than COVID does, and why wearing a mask is going to kill people more, right? not lockdown, or why COVID is the way they're testing for it is grossly inflating the number of infections, or on and on and on, and like hours on this, and that's still up.
Yeah, so, because if you find because they're probably better at gaming it, that you have to, that they maybe in the video description or in certain parts of it, they haven't used the key terms. I mean, we had
also when they use it is important. The part where I said COVID was a weapon was in the first minute.
Right.
Right. So anyway, go ahead.
Yeah. So, I mean, what you said about how any human being who watched the video would get that obviously in context, you didn't mean that, in the way that it sounds out of context, since the video is obviously not endorsing any sort of conspiracy theory about COVID, does get to another problem, which I think I saw you post after you initially asked both me and Joe Rogan if you could come on our
yeah, Joe hasn't gotten back to me.
Yeah.
I'm very grateful you did, Ben.
So as luck would have it, I responded before Joe did, but and then I think I saw the next day you post like a screenshot of YouTube saying we reviewed it and it stands, right? We're not,
right. Yeah. And I have no idea what that means. And they didn't say why it stood or what they looked at and found out of that violated community standards. And
which there's something I've thought about a lot because, well, as you know, right, we had a shared previous experience of this.
Yes.
Last summer.
Yeah. This is worse than that one, though, by the way, Ben, because that one, they removed the video, but I don't think we got a warning saying that if we did it again, we could face real sanction, including removing the channel, which we did this time.
Wow.
So yeah.
Yeah, they didn't do that, but in 2019, I did a video for the Zero Books channel, responding as so many of my 2019 videos for the Zero Books channel were to Ben Shapiro, and in particular, I was responding to a video that Ben Shapiro had done about, like, sort of trying to address why it is that since he often says that his conservative politics flow from his Judaism and from his concern with Israel, so why it is, which is a big problem for Ben's worldview, that the great majority of American Jews always vote for Democrats and seem to be relatively politically liberal or progressive, comparatively speaking, and what's going on there. And his explanation of that fact was that these are ginos, these are Jews in name only, who don't actually care about Judaism, Israel, anything like that. Which, by the way, let's just pause to say that itself sounds pretty offensive to me. But like, that's fine, right? Like, that's YouTube, as far as I know, has never troubled that video. And I did a video responding to it, and so the very, like, sort of boringly straightforward description of the content of the video and the title was Benjamin Shapiro was wrong about Israel and American Jews, and in the video, and I was being my most, like, most politely pedantic and sort of calmly nerdy self, version of myself in this video. I was just very, like, in a very mellow way, I was just going through it and be like, well, he says this, but that doesn't make sense because of this, and his claim is this, but what about this other thing, and I was and I was urging the idea that there might be people who care about some of the things that he says that American Jews don't care about, who still draw political conclusions to the left of his, and that was really that was really it. It was just a here's Ben Shapiro doing his Ben Shapiro thing and making shitty arguments video. And this was flagged by YouTube as hate speech, and it was which is objectively hilarious, because, like, in the video I was doing things like being like, well, what about Michael Lerner, who's a left-wing rabbi, and he says this and that, this is like the least anti-Semitic thing ever, but it was flagged as hate speech, and initially it was demonetized, and not only was it demonetized, but you couldn't
see it. It got removed eventually.
Yeah, it eventually got removed. For a while, it was just a bargain. It was just behind this, like, you had to click through a screen saying, I understand that I'm about to watch horribly offensive hate speech.
Why couldn't they have just done that to this video? That would have been better. Anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, that would have been. And then eventually it was taken down entirely. But also, you immediately filed an appeal, as one does, which, and then it was. And then shortly afterwards, like, I think maybe even a couple days afterwards, we got one of those things saying, your appeal has been reviewed and the restrictions on the video stand. And at the time I thought, how is that possible? Right? How is it possible that a human being looked at this and decided that there's anything I said in this video that was anti-Semitic? And eventually, I remember talking to our late friend Michael Brooks about this, and actually it was kind of funny, because when I originally texted him, he was like, I think he was at vacation, like in like Costa Rica or someplace like that. So he was like, so he was like sitting at the beach having a good time. He was basically like, man, I don't want to talk about this right now, But then, like,
right.
when he got back, he was like, this is why I'm super careful about stuff like this. They said he had a video advocated in one, single democratic one state solution in Israel Palestine, but the word Israel didn't even appear in the title of the video. It said his video was for TMBS was called "Democracy in the Middle East," which is a good strategy. I mean, it's insane when you say it. It's like like you start to feel like in some weird way you're doing the corporate version, like corporate controlled algorithm version of being like a writer in the Soviet Union or apartheid South Africa who can't explicitly reference Stalinism or apartheid, so they have to write novels where they cryptically refer to it. But the thing is, like, I spent so much time thinking about this, right? How could the appeal have been reviewed by a human, and they decide to let this up, until it finally occurred to me, oh yeah, I'm sure that whatever human being is in charge, of the stage of the appeals process, they probably have like 100 videos to review a morning. And, from things the algorithm flagged, and then they're tasked with reviewing, they're not watching any of this. They're like clicking on it enough to sort of glance at the title and like maybe listen to the, maybe at best, like watch like 30 seconds at the beginning.
Yeah. I'm sure they got to the moment where I put Alex Jones in, right? And then watch that. Maybe that's like the first 30 seconds. So yeah, no, he's an Alex Jones nut. We banned him from the channel.
This guy loves Alex Jones, and probably with the Israel video, they clicked on it, and it's like, something about Jews in Israel. Okay, probably is hate speech, whatever.
Right. Yeah.
That's probably.
And the problem is there's no appeal on that appeal. That's the end of the road.
Yeah.
And unless you have some way to get around it, and so that's what I'm trying to do. Actually, that's why I wanted to go on Joe Rogan. Why after Joe Rogan, my second step down was to go into your show, was right, because I wanted to make sure that I made every effort to reach YouTube and get to whoever might actually judge this in a human way, if it is at all possible. So I'm basically looking for a back channel, and running a media campaign on it is sort of my idea of how to get that back channel. But as I said at the beginning, I'm sort of conflicted because I'm not sure what my talking point should be. Was my talking point, hey, your system messed up? Or is my talking point, your system is messed up? Or is my talking point, your company doesn't deserve the legal protections it gets? How about all three?
I think you can do all three. I think you can say the fact that the system fucked up in this way, that they flagged something that's actually critical of conspiracy theories because of something that was designed to catch conspiracy theories, shows that the system is fucked up, right. which might itself show that they don't deserve the legal protection that they get. Not that my preferred way of resolving this would be to strip them of it, which would put the censorship into overdrive. Right. Because they'd be
no, they would fail as a company. It would just collapse. The social media would be, if it really was completely stripped and they were open to all sorts of defamation lawsuits, they would have to just stop being a place where people self-publish material and change completely.
Yeah. So Cherries, thank you for the super chat. Says for years YouTube was chill with white supremacists and anti-Muslim extremists. The algorithm cultivates hatred. So I think there are two things going on there, right? So one is that they seem to be, as a corporation, prone both to some weird inconsistencies, like the one you mentioned earlier, about what is and isn't censored, that you can actually do a video saying what yours was false.
Which, by the way, I think Trigonometry has every right and should be allowed to publish.
Yeah,
video, right.
Yeah, I agree with you. I would rather, like, I'm willing, like, I think what a lot of this stuff gets down to, I don't think it's the only thing it gets down to, but what a lot of this stuff gets down to is, are you more worried about bad views getting expression, or are you more worried about the space being too tightly constricted, and so controversial things that you want to say not getting said? And I'm much more worried about the second thing. I think that, especially in the long term, because
as a socialist who wants to change society, I have to want an open space for debate, and I think socialism itself would include something like, I had a Trotskyist on the other day, something like a permanent revolution. In other words, you would want to maintain open, innovative thought and talk in a socialist society. So you really do have to there's a profoundly anti-democratic kind of spirit underneath the urge to control speech because you're concerned about the wrong things being heard. It basically says you don't trust the judgment of people other than yourselves.
Yeah, right. I think that's exactly it. And saying that you don't trust, the judgment, the judgments of people or of a sufficiently large number of people above and beyond anything else you can say about it is something that's clearly incompatible with thinking that we need to deeply change society in ways that we can only do by convincing most people to believe things that they don't currently believe. And like, I've got bad news, guys, they don't. Right? Like, go talk to, if you're a radical leftist, well, when COVID is over, go talk to find 10 or 20 random people in the street and who are willing to stand there for a couple minutes and be quizzed on their political views. And they do not, by and large, believe, most of the things that, that you believe, right? Maybe there are some like mildly social democratic things that the majority of the American public is down for, but that's about as far as it goes right now. In particular, right? I mean, this is like constantly amazing me that like there are things that on the online left, that you're like excommunicated for not believing that, that not only are those things not majority views, but like even the much milder things that about those same subjects, the people being excommunicated believe are not majority views. Right. Right. Like my favorite example is if you think about like police and prison abolitionism, and so you could be a police abolitionist, you could be somebody like me who thinks, maybe like that doesn't really make that much, that doesn't really work if you start thinking about that through too much, but we should at least have some like super minimalistic version of it that like takes away like 90% of what the current thing does. Mm-hmm. And the thing
you'd be excommunicated because you're not a pure abolitionist.
Yeah. I mean, I saw somebody going after Daniel Bessner on Twitter the other week for being friends with Amber Frost because Amber Frost, said she doesn't agree with police abolitionism, and that made her a racist. And of course, meanwhile, here in Earth A, even if we just restrict ourselves to Black Americans, like something like 80% of Black Americans in polls don't actually want police presence in their neighborhoods to be reduced.
Right.
Reduced, not abolished, so which presumably puts them to the right of Amber Frost, never mind, police abolitionism.
Right. Yeah.
And we can talk about all the complicated reasons why that is and how we might hope to persuade people, or, certainly that there's any form of economic organization.
You have to change the conditions so that people would rather not have cops surveilling them, but anyway,
you probably have to solve some other stuff first. But the point is that right now, certainly if you're a radical leftist, we want to change society in ways that most people and most of the people that we would have to convince to make that happen don't yet believe. And B, that like all of the things we advocate are things that the people who run, corporations like YouTube don't like and don't want, definitionally. So I think it's like we definitely can't afford to have this idea that the big danger is misinformation, and our best guard against that danger is making it easier for corporations to crack down on speech that they don't like. And yes, as you say, I think in any socialist society I'd want, we would want there to be a process, like we would want it to continue to be the case, right? That there was this right of radical dissent, not just in principle, although certainly that too, but also if you think that there's some like process of trial and error that that just getting rid of capitalism doesn't mean that we necessarily get everything right the first time. Then there are pragmatic reasons to want that too.
Yep.
I mean, this is the point that Rosa Luxemburg made in her pamphlet on the Russian Revolution. Why socialism can't be delivered as a sort of gift of a benevolent one party state. So I think there are a lot of reasons that this should concern us, and I think that it's possible like sometimes, right? Not, I mean, obviously, cases like the two we've just been describing are cases that any sane version of YouTube would not, in fact, have censored those videos. But oftentimes, in my experience, when you first start saying things like this, we should really be concerned about free speech in some context. It's bad to be too censorious, whatever. What a lot of people will immediately do is they'll start coming up with what they think, I guess they think are like counterexamples to that. They'll sort of say, well, what about this horrible thing? Right? Do you want this horrible thing here? Or, when this horrible thing was disallowed, should that not have been disallowed? And I guess the idea is that if you agree that it should be, then you're for censorship and you're a hypocrite. But that itself presumably breaks up into two categories. One of them are cases like you sort of indicated when you were talking about the COVID conspiracy theories, where for the sake of the larger principle, you'd be willing to bite the bullet and say, yeah, that should not have been disallowed, right?
Right.
And the other are cases where maybe there would be a more reasonable system that would disallow it. When you come into so for example, Alex Jones, even if kicking him off the platform entirely was overkill, you could argue that maybe some of the Sandy Hook stuff veered into if he was like inciting harassment.
Look, that should have been taken down, right? The stuff where he said things about particular peoples and their kids around Sandy Hook, those videos wherever he talked about that should have been taken down. That was defamation. And he should have been, as he was, open for defamation lawsuits, but I don't think that the end result of that should be that he can never speak in the public square again. And that's what happened. It was not happening out of any concern for the public good. It was all about brand management and limiting their own legal liability.
Yeah, well, and certainly one way.
I mean, even YouPorn,
yeah,
banned Alex Jones videos on their platform. So obviously, this had nothing to do with reality. This is just it was like I don't know, hula hoops or something. The banning of Alex Jones.
Was there a stage where where he'd been kicked off of YouTube and his solution was to post videos on YouPorn?
I don't know that happened, but people post all sorts of shit because it's user-generated content on all sorts of platforms, including Pornhub and YouPorn, and if you want a perverse thrill, you can go and watch, I don't know, an academic lecture that someone posted on Pornhub. So see if that can do it for you.
I mean, really, what I'm getting at is should give them an argument episodes be posted. Like, am I missing a big, like a big?
Oh, I see what you're saying. Is that a market that we should tap into? Let's try it. Let's start putting our vids up on there. It's always a backup. I've got stuff on Vimeo right now, but I should look into the Pornhub and YouPorn academic video essay market.
I mean, I have to say, I would imagine, that audience members there are being like really pissed off when they're because you watch the first couple minutes of an academic lecture, you're like, okay, is this just like a really elaborate setup? Like is the
no, you can tell right away.
At some point,
they're just very different kind of production values at work in the two different forms. It's what I'm going to tell you as a connoisseur of both. I'll tell you that you would know immediately.
Fair enough. So I was just going to say, though, so one question is about outcomes, right? What actually should be taken down? And you think, okay, it's not bad, even if they went way overboard, like expelling him forever from the entire space. It's not bad that those particular Alex Jones videos were taken out. But then the other question is about process. And so I think that even in cases where we think the outcome's not necessarily bad, we can still have concerns about process. That do we are we disturbed by it when somebody who is, for better or for worse, like a really popular broadcaster, is completely purged from a medium with essentially no recourse? That like you said about the video, there's that one stage where some anonymous human does some kind of review process, which given some of the wacky results seems like it has to be pretty cursory. Like, and then that's it, right? Like maybe they'll decide to change their minds. They did with that that Ben Shapiro, you know.
Yeah, how did we get them to change their mind that time? Do you remember the process? Because I want to try that again with this video.
Unfortunately, I am not sure. All I can think.
Did we appeal more than once? Did we have the option to appeal more than once?
That's a good question. So we should go back.
I think what happened was we appealed 2 different actions, maybe.
Okay,
we should go back over it maybe, because we appealed
I think that's right.
Putting it behind a thing, and then we appealed them removing it.
We appealed putting it behind the "you're about to see something incredibly offensive" wall, and then we then that appeal was turned down, and then they took it down entirely, and I think we appealed that, and then randomly, like a little while later, they were like, okay, we reviewed your appeal, it's back up, no restrictions. Right. I don't know if we just got 2 different guys randomly in those 2 appeals. I don't know if any of the media stuff, like you know, I mean, I talked about it on TMBS once. I don't know if that helped at all. It's really hard to say, but that's the whole point, right? That like one of the things that you want in any sort of process, where you're concerned, you know, you're concerned about having bad outcomes. Like, so if it's just Doug Lain on his Facebook wall, you know, like blocking people, then I think we can have a extremely capricious process, and who cares?
Yeah, no, I just say if something irks me the wrong way at the wrong time of day, you know, unless I know the person and have known them for years, and even sometimes then, I can just block at the drop of like off with your head, and I get this sort of thrill. I imagine that they're being deleted from the universe as I block them.
Which I suppose is what Facebook, you know, wanted when it put in that feature to, you know, to give you.
That's right.
But that also does legitimately seem fine to me, because all that's at stake there is whether they can interact with you on Facebook. That's it, right? Like they're not stopped from using Facebook. They're not stopped from, I mean, I guess maybe reaching an audience in your comments, but like, you know, I can't get that excited about that.
Yeah.
Or for that matter, like I think, you know, Thomas Chatterton Williams, who's somebody whose politics are very much not my politics. I remember, for example, him using, you know, like a month ago or something, as an example of like, I don't know, of like the left-wing mob gone wild or something. I mean, whatever. I mean, I guess he's like a liberal, but he's like a centrist kind of liberal. And as an example of the left-wing mob gone wild, he posted this thing on Twitter saying there will come a time when Obama statues are taken down. And I remember the Current Affairs Twitter account, you know, quote tweeted that, said, yeah, no shit. You know, the guy like drone bombed, you know, weddings and funerals. Right. And his reaction to that was just that he was like astonished that there were leftists in the world so crazy, you know, that they would have a statue of Obama. So, you know, so very much not my politics. And in fact, another thing that I really dislike about him is his intense defense of Barry Weiss, who I think is like you know, vapid and reactionary, and you know, has, you know, et cetera, you know, like somebody I can't stand. But I also remember that like shortly after the Harper's letter came out, of which Williams was the primary author, you know, he mentioned something on Twitter about how he'd like kick somebody out of his house, you know, after an argument about Barry Weiss. And I'm not saying that's not funny, but I think the specific way that people thought it was funny doesn't, like, seems kind of poorly thought out to me. They're like, oh, haha, look at this like big hypocrite. He talks about free speech and he kicked this guy out of his house. It's like, well, no, I mean, not being
not having someone over to your house, it's not a form of censorship.
Yeah, no, right. This is not like the only way that kicking out a house guest stops somebody from disseminating their views is they can't disseminate them to you at least in person at that moment, right? Like
right.
You know, that's it. And that seems pretty okay to me. Whereas when you start talking about things like you know, like saying YouTube, that a video that, you know, tens of thousands of people would have otherwise viewed, you know, even for, you know, relatively small channel, that's you're not going to let those 30,000 people see it. That seems like a much bigger deal to me as far as the free flow of information and the free exchange of ideas. If you, or even like something like the Glenn Greenwald thing, right? We did a video discussion about this for Zero. Even like the Intercept, right? It's not the New York Times, but if they really violated this guy's contract, for politicized reasons, because they didn't want him to publish something, even that's right, something that could raise those concerns. And sure, I'm sure you could do a spectrum of cases and, say, all right, so we start out with Thomas Chatterton Williams' living room, right? There's no free speech concern there. And we go up to, the stuff about,
Facebook cancellations. Yeah.
And we could find lots of things in between and say, oh, okay, well, where do we draw the line? Where do we start having where do we start expressing these free speech concerns? And I would just say, well, no, you can't draw one. It's vague. It's fuzzy, right? But like, just because a line is fuzzy, that doesn't mean that there aren't clear examples on both sides of it. That if I like whether if you start whatever. I mean, like just use the shop worn example. If you start with Fabio and pluck out a hair one at a time, right? Like where's the point where he becomes bald? And good luck precisely answering that question. But whatever, right? I mean,
but you will recognize when he's bald.
Yeah, that doesn't actually mean that like if we lined up all the pictures, right, of Fabio with less and less and less hair, that that there aren't some of them where clearly and uncontroversially he's bald, and there aren't some of them where clearly and uncontroversially he's not bald, and then there's probably going to be some in between that we have no idea what to say about because they're indeterminate, and I think that might just be the nature of the beast.
I'm in that moment now with my hair being gray or not gray. It's an ambiguous moment.
Yeah,
with the beard, gray, but in my hair, it really depends on the lighting. Hey, can we share the link to the video?
Yeah, absolutely.
I want to say to people that I'm hoping that if I go on YouTube channels and podcasts, and I'm going to go on Alpha Bunga Bunga on Monday. I reached out to Matt Chrisman of Chapo and asked if I could go on Chapo. I've been trying to get on there for forever. So there's a link, and put it in maybe in the comments too or something so people can link to it. You can watch this. It's at our Patreon, but it's unlocked for everyone. And if people will tweet when they've seen it, or go on Facebook when they've seen it, if they think it doesn't violate the either if you think it doesn't violate the community standard, or if you think that the community standard is wrong, or both, if you could let people know that this is happening, and spread the word that our channel is at threat, because the point is here in our particular case, our YouTube channel is a big part of how we publicize our books, and if it were to disappear, it would be a major blow to the digital publicity we do for Zero Books, and it would hurt the imprint. So I am taking the warning very seriously, and apparently it does not go away. I have one strike against me if it happens again, and I don't know what will make it happen again. The whole channel could go down. So if people will let other people know about it, use social media, and maybe tweet at or write to YouTube to tell them that they need to reconsider, I'd appreciate it.
Fair enough. All right, thanks, Doug. Anything you want to plug before you go?
Well, I think I've been plugging away. That's the wrong thing. But yeah, I mean, people can check out Zero Books. You know what? I should mention your book's coming out next year. Canceling Comedians While the World Burns. Alpha Bunga Bunga is going to have a book coming out with us called The End of History. I'm writing a book. I think it's going to be called The Politics of Nice and Its Limits. I feel that like that's a clickable title. And Check out our YouTube channel while it's there.
I mean, I think I could have maybe a vague sense, but what's the politics of nice about?
The politics of nice is this idea that after socialism as a real political project was abandoned, what took its place was a politics of nice, a politics of survival and accommodation, and that that's the thrust of it.
Okay. I don't know what stage you're at here, but is the main title The Politics of Nice and Its Limits?
No, the main title is The Politics of Nice. Subtitle added
Okay.
and its limits.
All right. That's way better. I was gonna say. Okay. Well.
No, I mean, yeah. I would be very glad for you to kick around with me some other time, like how to make it even a tighter concept and book. But the point of it will be to explore what I sometimes talk about as a crisis in Marxism, or the post-Marxist turn, or the abandonment of radical politics, and to condemn the progressivist, statist, managerial, bureaucratic left. So
fair enough.
Yeah.
All right. Well, sounds good. Looking forward to reading that. And speaking of Zero Books, by the way, I should say the next episode of the podcast, Give Them an Argument, is one of the guests is going to be Rob Larson, who wrote a book called Capitalism and Unfreedom, the Toll Road to Serfdom. Which
are you going to make a video for us again sometime? You going to come back on our Monday schedule?
Yeah. I don't know.
Derek Barnes all ready to replace you. We've started running his videos on Mondays. So
okay, well, fair enough.
No, but we want you there. I want you there. I want to balance it out with the Varn energy with the Burgess energy. I don't think 100% Varn. I think people would glow. He would blow a gasket. I would blow a gasket. Everything would fall apart. We need some calming Burgess energy on Mondays.
Well, I liked the video that he did last week. The tough mindedness one. I'd like to think that he was channeling some Burgess energy there.
He was, yeah. I mean, he's definitely doing his version of you. So
fair enough.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, for sure. Got to get back and make some videos for Zero Books for sure. And you should come back. You should come back here soon. I've been thinking probably on Sundays, just because it's something that I would enjoy doing and get something out of, and I think people would like watching, of doing some like vintage debate breakdowns where like I and maybe a guest watch some old debate, like maybe even like put the word old in the title somewhere to like give us some freedom to do things that are from a while ago,
like Buckley versus Baldwin.
Yeah, actually, that's one of the ones I was thinking about doing. That's and that actually might be a good one for the first one, because it's short, and so try in terms of trying to get a sense for the format and like how much to interrupt them and whatever. That might be a pretty forgiving one to do, and it's got some great moments in it. So yeah, Buckley versus Baldwin, I think would be a good one. There's a
Destiny versus Molyneux.
Well, I don't know that I do Destiny versus Baldwin.
I know
but there's
like a giant drop down from the Buckley versus Baldwin. It's like, right into the sewer.
Yeah. That guy, we were talking about defamation earlier, so I'm not going to say anything speculative about what might have gone on in his life, but not Molyneux, right? Molyneux has, for better or for worse, he's always been what he is. But
you're talking about Destiny. What's going on with Destiny? Is there some rumors, some juice?
Well, I don't actually know. All I know is that it seems to me, from my casual, occasional observation of him, that he strikes me as a little bit more of a mess and a little bit more manic. Both of those things than he used to be. We could speculate about what might have caused those things, but he also, I don't know. I mean, like he just seems. All right, let's just say it. I mean, like he's always had annoying politics, but like I have found him increasingly unimpressive, and leave it at that. But that said, he did a debate last year that I've always wanted to watch with Michael Albert, the Paracon guy. I never got around to that, so I think that might be an interesting one.
Yeah, I'd do that with you if you wanted to.
Yeah, okay, let's do that. Let's plan on it. And like as like a deep cut in between, and certainly chronologically in between Destiny, Michael Albert and Buckley Baldwin. There's this debate from like the 80s or 90s that's a still socialist Christopher Hitchens debating some people from the Ayn Rand Institute. That I think would be really, like, it's a little bit long, but I think it'd be a lot of fun for this. But anyway, so I'm going to start doing that on Sundays. So depending on, I'll save the Destiny Michael Albert one for you, and depending on the schedule, we'll either do that soon or.
How many hours is it though? Maybe I'd want to do one of the short ones.
Yeah.
Destiny's debates are sometimes. I mean, the thing about Destiny, it's no surprise that his thinking isn't developing and that he's going kind of a little manic, because what does he do? Like 10 hours of live streaming every day, or some crazy thing like that?
Yeah.
I mean,
right. Which is,
how can you develop?
Which is
when you have no time to reflect.
Yeah, well, right, exactly. Like, I mean, God, I mean, I worry, I worry about that, just doing like stuff like this, like, a couple hours, maybe an hour or two, several times a week. And then also like writing a bunch of things that, just like, how are you supposed to like read and think and do all this stuff if you're like either like writing or talking all the time?
Why there are universities.
Yeah.
Right. There's why popular media is not the only approach to generating intellectual content. Is because you need people who have get paid to read books and think, which I sort of am jealous of more and more, because I'd love to spend like a month just reading history books. But
yeah, no, for sure. So so Destiny Michael Albert is 2.5 hours, but we could also like maybe
break it into pieces.
Yeah, exactly. It could be, Destiny versus Michael Albert Part 1, Destiny versus Michael Albert Part 2, and we could even do that in a little bit of an ad hoc way, see how much we cover with the first one, and then maybe like retroactively call, like rename the video Destiny versus Michael Albert Part 1. But yeah, that'll be fun. Let's do that. So on a Sunday, like early evening my time, late afternoon yours. That's so we should do that for sure. And I will be I won't let the yes, the Varns will not replace us. We'll back.
God, it's a Charlottesville reference.
just to encourage.
We have to keep our token Jew on Monday, so it's between you and Varn.
Josh, thank you for the super chats. That's just in case YouTube cancels you. So I appreciate that. But yeah, so thank you so much we'll do all those things soon. And thank you so much for coming on.
All right. See you around.
All right. See it. All right. That was Doug Lain from Zero Books. And I am doing this as if he were a guest on the podcast, and I had to do some sort of wrap up thing. But of course, this is just the live stream, so I don't. So let me just say that if anybody has any quick questions, I will maybe answer a couple before I go. But otherwise, we'll probably cut it there for today. Dara suggests that I should try to get Peter Hitchens on to debate politics and discuss his brother. Yeah, that would be fun. There's actually the guys at Modern Day Debate where I debated Mr. Reagan and about racism, and then about Trump, and I debated Kay Fellows about abortion. They had tried at one point to set up a debate between me and Peter Hitchens on like COVID and mask mandates, and he didn't go for that. But I will. I should reach out to him certainly sometime between now and when my Christopher Hitchens book is ready to come out, I will I will reach out to Peter Hitchens, see some other fun suggestions here. Scalia versus, for I guess the Sunday night debate breakdown, Scalia versus Breyer, Buckley versus Vallejo, ooh, Bad Faith versus Chomsky. Probably not going to do that one just because like I spent a whole bunch of time before the election engaged with that particular argument about swing states and lesser evil voting and all that stuff. But honestly, right now the election is over, and I would like to move on and talk about things other than the dilemmas created by a terrible electoral system for a little while. In fact, this is one of the reasons that I'm so annoyed by all of the paranoia and fantasism about Trump doing a military coup or something, because it seems like a way of holding on to the election. Like it's bad enough that we already have 2-year elections. Now we have to keep talking about Biden and Trump by making an issue of whether Biden, would really step down if he doesn't, like if he loses all of his challenges and stuff, which he will continue to do, obviously. And of course he will. I mean, at this point, he said, if the Electoral College votes for Biden, he'll leave office, even if he thinks it's unfair or the election was stolen for him, which is, very generous, right? That he's generously agreeing to leave office when he has literally no way of staying. But yeah, I think like, okay, guys, the election is over. We did that. We could all talk and think about something other than Biden versus Trump for a while, which frankly would be really fucking nice. Shawnee Handel asks, did you hear about the letter Amnesty Ireland signed and pushback directly related to this issue of silencing? I have not seen that, so I'll check that out. Similarly, Dave L. says Taibbi's article on Greenwald is a thoughtful take on editorial policy and censorship. Yeah, I mean, I really like Taibbi. I mean, I think that he doesn't come out of the left, and so sometimes I think that he does, he doesn't maybe, like sometimes when he's critiquing liberals or critiquing the left, he doesn't make good enough differentiation between those things just because he comes out of a much more normie sort of political background. No, I'm not going to give you a taste of the Michael Brooks, Doug Lain impression. That's sealed. It's funny. Just trust me on that. I'll go leave it at that. But so anyway, so that would be my only real criticism of Taibbi. But honestly, I think he's a really good writer. I've always enjoyed his writing, and I think he has a lot of interesting things to say. I'm subscribed to his Substack. I would encourage other people to subscribe to his Substack, but I just haven't had a chance to read his Greenwald take from his Substack, just because, see above that last part of my conversation with Doug. Too much else going on. Dr. Valencia says Google Murray Bookchin comrades. Yeah, I mean, okay. I would say, frankly, if you're going to Google past radicals, I don't know that he'd be at the top of my list, but whatever. Let's see. Yeah, I remember reading that or starting to read it, Bookchin's pamphlet, Listen Marxist. And I think there is some interesting stuff in there, but I think there's also, from what I can recall, a lot that really doesn't hold up. Like, basically, he's assailing Marxists for caring too much about material conditions when clearly we're in this long boom that will last forever. And so people's primary concerns are non-material, which, that really does not hold up, obviously. But yeah, that might be fun to read go back and read the whole thing and do a, do some sort of video or essay or something about that Bookchin essay. But honestly, I think that, frankly, I would, Google, Google Michael Harrington. I think that, he's certainly wrong about some things and some important things, like Palestine, but I think he has a lot of insights. I think that, I think, look, Google Trotsky, I mean, like, these are, whatever I agree or disagree with these different radical thinkers on, I think those would be higher on my personal list certainly than Murray Bookchin, which is just not an effort to start some sort of huge beef with the Bookchinites. I know he he has an inspiration for the Rojava experiment, which certainly gives him a few points, but also there are points where he seems to be really de-emphasizing class struggle, and that's a place where I really all right, deal. We'll each Google each other's, but that's a point where I really I really think that he went wrong, is the extent to which he seemed to be de-emphasizing the class dimension, at least relatively speaking, compared to other radicals. Which is not to say that he doesn't have anything interesting or insightful to say, maybe about other subjects, or that I've read anything like probably even as much as I should. So let's see. Yeah, it is funny to imagine. I'm just scrolling up, to make sure I hit a couple of questions that were asked earlier. The thing. So yeah, I think somebody is imagining, some Pornhub actors, if that's the word you use there, Pornhub actors, reading out Zero Books content, which is kind of funny. But to do, see, the Grateful Dead's YouTube channel is always doing live conversations with band members and presenting certain gigs from over the years. Check it out. Good content. I've never been a huge Grateful Dead fan, I've got to say, even though there is definitely some overlap between the music that I like and other music that Deadheads typically like. But we'll get into that another time. Not going to start doing a big rock music conversation, or else this stream would last much longer than the last minute or so that I want it to last here. So we're going to save that for another time. Speaking of music, I already mentioned that Rob Larson, author of Capitalism and Unfreedom, The Toll Road to Serfdom, is going to be on the next episode of Give Them an Argument. That's the one that is recording tomorrow. So live for patrons, and after it's, the video editor Forrest has done his magic, it then premieres to the world in general, or at least YouTube in general, on Monday night at 7:30 p.m. Eastern. So if you can become a patron, of course, really appreciate the support. Means a lot. Does things like, let me pay that part-time video editor I mentioned at a living wage, which I think is important to do. So that is $5 a month, and you get early access to all the episodes. You can watch them recorded live, and you also get regular Discord office hours, group voice chats. Did one this week that was a lot of fun, covered a lot of territory, politics, philosophy, whatever people want to talk about. Yes. And also, there's various other bonus content that's planned for the Patreon. So I just want to plug that. Yes, me and David Griscom are still doing Outlaws and Revolutionaries. That's what I was going to say. Speaking of music. So last week, David was out of town. He was actually back in Texas, I believe. So he was not around to do Outlaws and Revolutionaries at the usual time. We probably could have set up a pre-record, but it was just a busy week, and I dropped the ball on setting that up. But he is going to be back for Outlaws and Revolutionaries for the episode recording tomorrow, live for patrons, comes out for everybody else on Monday. We're going to be talking about Sturgill Simpson for this week's Outlaws and Revolutionaries. Also, in between Rob talking about capitalism and unfreedom and Griscom talking about Sturgill Simpson, there is going to be a panel. I think Rob's going to stick around for the panel, but it's also going to be Alex Gurevich, who's a historian of the early American labor movement, like late 19th century, and has written some really good stuff for Jacobin related to that and other subjects. Like he wrote one defending Bernie Sanders' use of the phrase wage slavery and connecting it back to the way that early labor movement sort of called back to the struggle against slavery. When I interviewed him about this for the Jacobin YouTube channel, he quoted a great line from some Knights of Labor newspaper about how in authoritarian workplace relations, something of slavery still remains, something of freedom has not yet been achieved. I am also, and then also the last person on that panel. Oh yeah, so that's going to be Alex Gurovich. Then the last person on that panel is one of my favorite historians who does popular stuff and also election commentator and lots of other things. Jacobin contributing editor Matt Karp, who has in fact written a lot about the struggle against slavery and what the modern left can learn from it. Like, yeah, an article I remember called Abraham Lincoln's Political Revolution. So that should be a really fun panel, really fun episode talking about sort of socialist and, you know, and small r Republican conceptions of freedom, and how they're relevant to political struggle today, and then end with a little, you know, drink a little whiskey, talk a little Sturgill Simpson. Should be a good time. Yeah, I will think about James McMurtry. So anyway, this is a lot of fun. I always really enjoy doing these. It means a lot to me that everybody came by and asked questions and did all of that. Really appreciate all the support for the channel. If you haven't done it yet, please do like and subscribe. It really does help. And check out the next episode premiering on Monday. The episode premiering the Monday after that is going to be with Anna Kasparian. She was originally going to be an episode or two ago. The schedule got re-scrambled, but she's going to be on for the episode premiering on December 14th. And then this is as good a time as any. I'll just close with this announcement to announce that the episode recording live for patrons on December 19th and premiering on December 21st is going to include an interview with Slavoj Žižek. So really looking forward to that. Hope you guys check out all of that good content. And I will see you guys back here for the first installment in that series of Sunday debate breakdown live streams at 5 p.m. Eastern right here. Thanks, guys. Left is best.